MSNBC senior political and national correspondent Jacob Soboroff, who was at the governor's office in downtown Chicago, where Governor Pritzker is about to speak at a news conference. Retired four-star general and MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey, and presidential historian and professor of history at Rice University, Douglas Brinkley. Doug, because we started with history, I'm going to begin with you. Talk to me about what the nation was like back in the early 1960s. Why the deployment of the National Guard, the federalizing of the National Guard in Mississippi was necessary in that moment, according to JFK?
Well, it all really began in 1954 with Brown versus Topeka, the Supreme Court decision, which integrated and called for the integration of schools. You see flashpoints in 1957 at Central High School with President Eisenhower having to do the same, of sending in National Guards because then Governor Orville Faubus was a segregationist and was refusing to adhere to the Brown decision.
Guys, John, speaking, you need to hear this today. Trump publicly told his press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, she was doing a terrible job, a pattern of public needling that has been building for months. The youngest person to ever hold the role, she faces the impossible task of defending a president who undermines her in front of the very press corps she manages. The moment that really kicked this whole saga into high gear happened when the president was in the Oval Office signing some legislation, doing the kind of routine event that usually generates a few headlines and then fades away. He started going off on the media like he's done countless times before, complaining about coverage, claiming he gets overwhelmingly negative publicity. And then, completely out of nowhere, he pivoted and pointed directly at Leavitt. He suggested that maybe she was the reason for all that bad press.
And the great clip you just played of President Kennedy, who every time you watch him grows in stature, JFK. But James Meredith was a son of Mississippi. He joined the Air Force after World War II. He was a vet. He quit and he simply wanted to go to school. He thought about going to Jackson State, all-black school, but he decided to go to University of Mississippi and determined he was. He became an icon and a hero for his persistence. But at Oxford became a war zone, not just having to escort Meredith to class, but Molotov cocktails, as you mentioned, people being killed. And in the end, day after day after day, eventually there was calm in Oxford, but the federal troops stayed there for 10 more months because it was like a war zone in Oxford. Eventually, Meredith got his degree at Ole Miss. There's a statue of him at the stadium at University of Mississippi. And last thing, Meredith went on to get a law degree at Columbia, came back to march for freedom and was shot.
He looked her straight in the eye and told her she was doing a terrible job in front of reporters and cameras. The room went quiet for a moment as everyone processed what they'd just heard. And then, almost like he suddenly remembered that he actually needed her, he turned to the room and asked whether they should keep her, like it was some kind of public vote, like her job security was a matter for the press corps to decide. He followed up with a casual, "I think we'll keep her," as if he was doing her a favor by not firing her on the spot. Now, the White House quickly jumped in to clarify that it was all just a joke, that everyone was laughing, that nobody should take it seriously. And look, maybe it was intended as a joke. Maybe the president genuinely thought he was being funny. But think about the position that puts her in.
Numerous times with bird pellet guns, body just riddled with holes some years later. So the racism in that period in the South was deeply intense.
So I wonder, Jacob, have you seen anything commiserate to that in your reporting? Is it that hot out there right now? So hot because of the tension between maybe ICE enforcement and the protesters that the only way to cool it off would be to send in the National Guard?
That's not what local elected officials say in any of the places that we have seen, and certainly that I have been reporting on the ground, particularly in Los Angeles. In the early nights in Los Angeles, the use of force by the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department that preceded the deployment of the National Guard under Title 10 of U.S. Code by Donald Trump was about a small gathering. Because of the deployment, of the federal immigration enforcement agents to carry out the stated goal of the largest mass deportation campaign in the history of the United States of America. And we are seeing echoes of those types of protests.
She's standing there at that time pregnant with her second child, already dealing with the physical and emotional demands of pregnancy while managing one of the most stressful jobs in the country. And her boss is publicly questioning whether she's any good at what she does, right in front of the people whose coverage she has to manage every single day. That's not exactly a confidence booster. That's not the kind of support that helps someone thrive in a difficult role. That's a power move dressed up as comedy, a way of reminding everyone in the room exactly who holds the power and who's expected to just take whatever comes their way with a smile. What makes this even more significant is that this wasn't some isolated incident. This fits into a pattern that had been developing for a long time.
But not some kind of wide-scale citywide violence like you would believe to be happening if you listen to what was happening and being said from the White House and certainly by the president himself, the likes of Stephen Miller, border czar Tom Homan, who was on the ground in Los Angeles, but we haven't seen here. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was here last week, and there have been flashpoints where I was talking to you from earlier today as we await Governor Pritzker's news conference here on the day that he has sued the federal government over the potential deployment of the National Guard here to Chicago. That facility, the Broadview facility, the neighborhood where the apartment building was raided, there was certainly a clash between law enforcement and the local citizens here. But that was something that the law enforcement themselves initiated by raiding that building in the overnight hours. Same can be said about the enforcement operation that led to the clash, that led to the shooting of the woman who we've been reporting on here today in Chicago. But again, nothing as you drive around Chicago. I'm in the middle of downtown Chicago in the governor's office right now as we wait to hear beyond this lawsuit what he has to say, both to President Trump and about whether or not the state and the city will do any kind of cooperation whatsoever. The mayor, I should note, signed an executive order today saying that they're basically ice-free zones in Chicago at all city property.
Months before that Oval Office moment, there was already a whole controversy brewing after a photo of Leavitt mysteriously disappeared from photo agencies. The image showed her at a Thanksgiving press briefing, standing next to a turkey that was about to be pardoned while holding her young son. It seemed innocent enough, a nice family moment in the midst of a hectic job. But soon after it was published, it got quietly pulled from photo agencies after word got out that the White House didn't like how it looked. Somebody in that building cared enough about how one single image made Leavitt appear that they got it removed entirely. That tells you there's a real obsession with controlling her image down to the smallest detail. And when you're under that level of scrutiny about literally every photo, when every aspect of your appearance and presentation is being monitored and managed, and then your boss turns around and publicly says you're doing a terrible job, that's a lot to carry. The tension that was simmering beneath the surface didn't resolve itself either.
Not to be used for these immigration enforcement activities. The bottom line is local officials do not want this federal presence here. They certainly don't want a military presence on the ground, and they continue to say that over and over. That's, I think, what we're going to hear from Governor Pritzker here in just a couple of minutes as we await him here in downtown Chicago, Katie.
So, General McCaffrey, I'm hoping you can help me just try to poke into this a little bit further. You know, I wasn't alive in 1962, so I can't speak to how it felt down there in Mississippi or how the country felt. But I was alive in the 90s, and I can tell you how it felt in Los Angeles during the LA riots. And it was scary in Los Angeles. I mean, it was not the entire city. It's a giant city. But there were broad swaths of the city that were lawless and scary. I mean, my dad famously said on camera, it's like the LAPD had abandoned the city of Los Angeles during the riots. He and my mother were over there, over above it, covering the riots as it was happening. Are you seeing anything? Do you have any sympathy for the deployment of the National Guard? Anything that would require the National Guard to come in and assist law enforcement? I mean, we saw a video a few minutes ago of somebody ramming their car into an ICE vehicle. Is that an example of something being a little bit too hot to need the National Guard?
It just kept resurfacing month after month in new and increasingly public ways. Each time it generated headlines, social media debates, and endless analysis about what it really meant. Some people laughed it off, saying it was just Trump being Trump, his signature blunt humor on display. Others were genuinely bothered by it, seeing it as a troubling pattern of public humiliation aimed at one of his most loyal and hardest working aides. And honestly, both reactions make sense once you see the whole picture. The jokes are genuinely funny in the moment if you don't think too hard about them. The delivery is classic Trump, unexpected, unfiltered, and impossible to predict. But when you step back and look at the pattern, when you see how this keeps happening over and over again, it starts to look less like comedy and more like something else entirely. So what's really going on here? Is this just Trump being Trump, cracking jokes the way he always has? The same unfiltered approach that got him elected in the first place? Or is there something deeper happening? A calculated strategy to keep his closest aides off balance, to remind them that their position depends entirely on his goodwill, to maintain the power dynamic in a way that ensures absolute loyalty. There's probably some truth to both interpretations. Trump has always operated this way, using humor and unpredictability as tools of control. But there's also something undeniably pointed about the way he keeps coming back to this particular staff member, singling her out again and again in front of cameras, making her the target of jokes that are just edgy enough to be uncomfortable, just sharp enough to leave a mark. Understanding this dynamic requires looking at the full timeline, not just isolated moments. Think about the sequence of events that have unfolded. The public questioning of whether she should be replaced, the photo controversy that showed how closely her image is controlled, the Oval Office comment about doing a terrible job, and then the correspondent's dinner moment that added an entirely new layer to this ongoing saga. Each of these events individually might be dismissed as an awkward joke or an overblown controversy. But when you put them together, when you see how they form a pattern of repeated behavior stretching across more than a year, it becomes clear that this isn't random. Something is driving this dynamic, something about the relationship between this particular president and this particular press secretary that keeps generating these public moments. And understanding that something is key to understanding how power actually works at the highest levels of American politics. The correspondent's dinner moment, which happened after Leavitt had just returned from maternity leave, is perhaps the most telling example of the whole pattern. She'd been out of the briefing room for weeks, dealing with a newborn, adjusting back into one of the most high-pressure jobs in the country. The event itself had been postponed earlier in the year after a security scare involving an attempted attack targeting the president. So there was already tension in the air, everyone on edge about what might happen, what might be said. And then the president got up to speak in front of a room full of media professionals from every major outlet in the country. He congratulated her on the baby, said nice things about her work, called her a star. And then, right in the middle of all that praise, he dropped a word that changed everything. He said she could be nasty. The room actually gasped, followed by uncomfortable laughter as everyone processed what they'd just heard. The gasping in that room was genuine. It wasn't staged or manufactured. You could hear it in the recording, that collective intake of breath from people who suddenly realized they were witnessing something awkward, something that crossed a line from humor into something less comfortable. And then came the laughter. The kind of nervous, uncertain laughter that happens when people don't quite know how to react, when they're not sure whether they're supposed to find something funny or whether they should be horrified. The president tried to soften it right after, saying she has one of the hardest jobs in the White House because she has to deal with very difficult people, meaning the press. But the damage of that word choice was already done the second it left his mouth. The word nasty hung in the air, impossible to unhear, impossible to explain away as just another joke. Let's think about why that particular word carries so much weight. In the context of Trump's political career, nasty is a word he's used before to describe women who challenge him, women who push back against his authority, women who refuse to play by his rules. It has a specific history, a specific resonance that goes beyond its literal meaning. So when he used that word to describe his own press secretary, the person who defends him every single day, the person who sacrificed her time and energy and family life to represent him to the world, it landed differently than it would have if he'd used it to describe a political opponent. It landed as a betrayal of loyalty, a public diminishing of someone who's given everything to support him. And it happened in a room full of the very reporters she has to deal with every single day at that podium. The people whose coverage she has to manage, whose questions she has to answer, whose skepticism she has to overcome. The timing of this moment is also significant. Leavitt had just come back from maternity leave after having her second child, a daughter. She'd been out of the briefing room for weeks, dealing with all the challenges that come with a newborn, plus all the challenges that come with returning to one of the most demanding jobs in the country after a significant absence. That's already a difficult transition under any circumstances. And the moment she steps back into the spotlight, the moment she's back in front of the cameras and the country, her boss publicly calls her nasty. That's not just an awkward joke. That's a statement about how much she's valued, about whether her sacrifice and loyalty actually mean anything, about whether the years of defending him through every controversy have earned her any respect or protection. It's also worth noting that Melania Trump actually skipped the rescheduled dinner entirely. The First Lady was notably absent from the event, which meant Leavitt ended up attending as Trump's companion for the evening. So she wasn't just there as press secretary doing her job, she was standing right next to him for the whole event, serving as his public partner for the evening, representing the administration in a way that went beyond her official duties. And that makes getting singled out and called nasty in front of that room even more awkward when you really think about it. She was doing him a favor by being there, by filling a role that would otherwise have been empty, and her reward was getting publicly insulted in front of everyone. Once that moment hit the internet, it didn't just fade away quietly. Clips of the comments spread everywhere within hours. People replayed the exact second the room gasped, debated online whether it was harmless ribbing or something a lot more pointed. Some defended Trump, saying it's just his personality, the same blunt humor he's always used, and that Leavitt herself probably didn't think twice about it. Others pushed back hard, saying no boss should be publicly calling a loyal employee nasty in front of a room full of national reporters, no matter how many compliments get wrapped around it. The debate raged across social media with everyone weighing in on what it really meant. And it shows you just how much people are paying attention to how Trump treats the people closest to him. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Apparently, earlier that same day, Leavitt herself had given reporters a heads up that Trump's speech that night was going to be, in her own words, vicious. So she already knew her boss was gearing up to go scorched earth on that stage. She was basically bracing everyone for it, warning them that he was planning to attack his critics and his enemies and whoever else crossed his path that night. And then he turns around and includes her in the roast too. So either she genuinely didn't expect to be a target herself, or she knew it was coming and had to just stand there and take it anyway, smiling through it because that's literally her job. Either way, it's a remarkable demonstration of how little control even the most senior staff have over their own treatment. You can warn the press about what's coming, you can prepare everyone for the worst, but you can't protect yourself from being the punchline. When you put this whole timeline together, the picture that emerges is unmistakable. The public questioning of whether she should be replaced, the photo controversy that showed an obsession with controlling her image, the terrible job comment in the Oval Office, the nasty comment right after she returns from maternity leave. That's not just one awkward joke. That's a pattern. A repeated pattern of Trump publicly needling one of the most loyal people working for him, over and over, in front of cameras, in front of reporters, in front of the entire country watching at home. And the pattern tells you something real about how this particular relationship actually works. It tells you that loyalty in this White House doesn't necessarily buy you respect or protection. It just buys you a front row seat to becoming the next punchline whenever the boss needs one. Now, it's worth stepping back for a moment and comparing this to how press secretaries in past administrations have generally been treated by their bosses. Every president has their own style, their own way of interacting with staff. Some are warm and supportive, others are demanding and difficult. But it's pretty rare for a sitting president to repeatedly publicly question whether his own spokesperson should be fired as a running joke across multiple separate events over more than a year. Most administrations try to project unity, especially with the person standing at that podium representing the president's message every single day. They understand that undermining your own press secretary undermines your entire message. They understand that the person who speaks for you needs to look credible, needs to have authority, needs to be taken seriously by the press. This dynamic with Leavitt breaks from that norm in a pretty noticeable way. And that's part of why it keeps generating so much attention every time it happens. So is this just Trump's sense of humor? The same blunt, off-the-cuff style he's always had? Or is there something a little more calculated going on here? Is he using Leavitt as a kind of release valve whenever he wants to deflect attention away from bad coverage and onto someone else? Honestly, it's probably a mix of both. Trump has always used humor and unpredictability as tools of control. He's always tested the loyalty of those around him by seeing how much they can take, how much they're willing to absorb without pushing back. And there's something undeniably useful about having a designated target, someone you can publicly joke about who can't really defend themselves, because defending themselves would mean criticizing the boss. It gives you a way to generate headlines, to dominate the news cycle, to remind everyone watching that you're unpredictable and powerful and willing to say anything about anyone. But there's also something genuinely personal about the way Trump treats Leavitt, something that goes beyond strategic calculation. He clearly has a specific dynamic with her, a relationship that involves both genuine praise and public humiliation in almost equal measure. He calls her a star. He says she's done a fantastic job. He recognizes the difficulty of what she does. And then in the next breath, he calls her nasty, or suggests she might be the reason for his bad press. It's a push and pull pattern that keeps her off balance, that makes it impossible for her to ever fully relax or feel secure. And whether that's intentional or just a reflection of Trump's natural communication style, the effect on the person receiving it is the same either way. You never fully relax. You never fully feel secure. You're always one joke away from being publicly humiliated again, even after you've proven yourself over and over. Trump's pattern of mixing praise and public criticism creates intermittent reinforcement, a powerful control dynamic that keeps Leavitt uncertain and working harder. The stark power imbalance, with the president publicly needling his youngest ever press secretary, leaves her with no real option to push back. Can you imagine Leavitt standing up at that podium the next day and telling reporters that the comment actually hurt her feelings? Can you imagine her saying that she felt humiliated or disrespected? That would be career suicide in that role. The press would have a field day with it. They'd write endless stories about the rift in the White House, about how the president's staff can't stand him, about how the administration is falling apart. Her political career would be over before she even had a chance to build it. So instead, she has to laugh along, brush it off, and keep doing her job like nothing happened, because that's the only real option available to her. She has to smile through every insult, absorb every joke, maintain her composure no matter what happens. And that's what makes the power dynamic so powerful. The person with the power can say whatever they want, whenever they want, with no consequences. The person without the power has to just take it. This story matters because Leavitt isn't just some random staffer. She is the face of Trump's entire media strategy. She's the one who stands at that podium every day and defends him to the press, to the public, to the entire country. She's the one who takes the hardest questions, absorbs the sharpest criticism, represents the administration to the world. So when he publicly undermines her, even as a joke, it sends a message not just to her, but to everyone watching. It tells the press corps that even the people most loyal to Trump aren't safe from getting roasted in public. It tells other staff members that loyalty doesn't guarantee respect. It tells the entire country that the president will say whatever he wants about anyone, regardless of how hard they work or how much they sacrifice. And honestly, it raises a bigger question about whether loyalty in this White House actually gets rewarded with respect, or whether it just gets you a front row seat to become the next punchline whenever the boss needs one. We've seen this pattern before with other staff members who were fiercely loyal to Trump and then ended up on the receiving end of his public criticism. The list is long and getting longer. People who gave everything to support him, who sacrificed their reputations and their careers to defend him, who stood by him through every scandal and controversy, only to find themselves publicly humiliated when it suited his purposes. So Leavitt's experience isn't unique. It's part of a broader pattern of how Trump treats the people closest to him. But because she's so visible, because she's in front of cameras every single day, her experience is the one we all get to witness in real time. So why does this actually matter to you sitting at home watching this play out? Because it's a window into how power really works at the very top of American politics. It's easy to watch these clips and just laugh along because, honestly, some of it is genuinely funny in the moment. The delivery is perfect. The timing is impeccable. It makes for great television and even better social media clips. But when you zoom out and look at the pattern, what you're really watching is one of the most powerful men in the world repeatedly publicly testing the loyalty of one of his closest and hardest working aides. And every single time she smiles through it, because that's the job. That's what loyalty in that world actually costs. It's a reminder that even at the very top of American politics, in the most powerful building in the country, the basic dynamics of who holds the power and who has to just take it with a smile don't really change all that much. Who benefits from all of this? Honestly, in a strange way, it might actually help Trump more than it hurts Leavitt. Every time one of these moments goes viral, it dominates headlines. It gets clipped and shared everywhere. It distracts, at least for a news cycle, from whatever other story might be causing him real trouble that week. Leavitt takes the public hit, absorbs the awkward laughter, and Trump gets to control the narrative. He gets to look like he's just cracking harmless jokes about someone he claims to love working with, while simultaneously reminding everyone in the room exactly who's in charge. And there's another angle worth considering here too. Every time this happens, it actually reinforces Trump's own brand as this unfiltered, say-anything kind of leader who doesn't play by normal political rules, even when it comes to his own staff. He's not like other presidents. He doesn't sugarcoat things. He doesn't pretend to be something he's not. He says what he thinks, no matter who it's about. So while it looks like Leavitt is the one taking the hit in the moment, the bigger picture shows Trump using these moments to reinforce exactly the image he's built his entire political career on. Trump's public undermining of Karoline Leavitt is a pattern. Not an accident. Each moment gets shared and debated, and she keeps smiling through it. It's a story about the cost of loyalty at the highest levels, and it's likely to repeat as long as both are in their roles.